Race 2 then in the Moto2 European Championship here in Barcelona for round 4 of the FIM CEV Repsol at the Circuit de Barcelona-Catalunya. We saw the first race of the day in the Moto2 European Championship earlier on here this afternoon go the way of Jesko Raffin of Switzerland, taking the 25 championship points for a third race in succession. 3 victories in a row, a unique hat-trick that gives him a significant championship advantage. A look at the track, 4.627 kilometers in length here in Barcelona. And we've seen plenty of overtaking manoeuvres in all of our categories. The calmest of the races so far, the more strategic race of the day, was race 1 in the Moto2 European Championship. And all of the riders will be hoping for similar in this one after we had 3 starts in the end to the Moto3 Junior World Championship race. As I said, in the context of the series overall, while we had that break earlier on, we've got a bit of a breakaway top 2 in the Moto2 class. Jesko Raffin and Augusto Fernandez now have a 30-point championship gulf behind them to the rest of the group, and it's a battle for consistency further down the order. Edgar Pons had 2 good races in a row now to move up into 4th in the championship standings, but failed to score, of course, in Estoril weekend. So he's got work to do. Dimaseki at the moment holds 3rd in the championship standings, and he was among a group of 5 or 6 riders who broke clear at the front of the pack in race number 1. It was Jesko Raffin who made the start. It was his championship rival on the 73 machine, Fernandez, who made a poor start and had to battle his way back through the field, getting very aggressive, it must be said, in the early stages. Elbows out and a bit of side swiping as well to find his way through. He eventually broke through into 3rd position. A couple of errors changed the rankings up front. We saw Edgar Pons dropping back into 3rd position. Augusto Fernandez coming through. In fact, it could be the move here. Fernandez ducking down the inside line, and through he went. And then closed down Jesko Raffin to make it a head-to-head duel up front between the top 2 in the championship standings. The pair exchanged positions on a couple of occasions, but it was Jesko Raffin who came out once again on top for a 3rd successive race victory. And now Raffin of Switzerland is hoping to further extend his championship leading margin. Good news for Augusto Fernandez is that he came over the line in 2nd position for the 3rd time this season. Damage limitation ride for him. It keeps things tight at the top of the leaderboard. 15 points between the 2 of them, and plenty of racing still to come. Moto2 in 2018. Dimaseki is the closest rival in terms of points, but realistically it's looking as though it's going to be a separate battle for 3rd in the championship standings overall because of that gulf in points, but also, to be fair, in performance. Edgar Pons doing a good job to keep with the top 2 in race number 1 while they fought amongst themselves. He took 3rd position, his 2nd podium of the campaign, and he will be the next challenger for 3rd position in the championship fight. But Raffin and Fernandez looks set to be a head-to-head battle. Race 2 once again. Rejoin us then trackside for the final race of the day here in Barcelona. The FIM CEV Repsol round number 4 in Catalonia, and it's the Moto2 European Championship that rounds out our proceedings here this afternoon. Race 2 for these riders, so they've already sampled the track, but they have had a long wait, of course, after delays in the Moto3 category before they get to take to the track for a 2nd time.
Yeah, absolutely. You can see there on your screen those 3 wins in a row now for Raffin. He'll be in the best position again on pole and knows he's already won that first race, so hopefully he'll be looking to do a double. But Fernandez, he looked pretty disappointed in Parc Fermé after the first race. He really did look pretty angry that he just not quite had the pace for Raffin, but obviously as well he had a difficult start to that first race and had to do a lot of work to get back on his tail. So I think definitely for him the goal will be to get a good start and not get swallowed up off the line, and then see if he's got a little bit more tyre left maybe towards the latter stages.
Importantly for Fernandez, of course, he doesn't get to start on the front row. The grid positions are the same as they were in race number 1 because they were settled by qualifying, which took place yesterday, of course. Edgar Pons then lining up alongside Raffin on the front row, and then Hector Garzo, who sits 6th in the point standings. A couple of good results in a row for him now, but not quite able to live with the top 3. It really was a break breakaway top trio, separate fight between 3 or 4 riders just behind them, and then a larger group further down the order.
Yeah, definitely. And obviously in that first race, it was a bit of a teammate battle to the line between Tulovic and Garzo. Garzo just taking that, so I'm sure Tulovic will want some revenge this time round. Obviously both also fresh from having been on replacement duty in the Moto2 World Championship. So pretty track ready, these guys. And Tulovic as well, doing stock 600 this season. There's a lot of bike time for him in 2018, so that's always good, because obviously he's a young rider, a lot of experience already, but really making those steps of progress. And like I said, already a podium this season. I'm sure he'll want to make sure that he's at least ahead of Garzo at the end of this one.
Second row on the grid then for the number 73, Augusto Fernandez of Spain. 15 points is his championship deficit, and I suspect that's part of why he was so frustrated. It was a 10-point swing, effectively. If he'd managed to beat Raffin, the gap would be a lot narrower now. We'd be talking about a 5-point deficit between them. Instead, it's 15. And as we head towards the latter stages of this season, that type of gap will be tough to make up against a rider, or with a rider with whom he seems to have quite an advantage over the rest of the pack. It's hard to make a big difference.
Yeah, definitely. Obviously, when you get to those kind of levels of points deficit, you need a mistake from your competitor, really. There's very, very little chance, unless he has a kind of, you know, sort of intermittent technical problem or something like that throughout a race. There's very little chance of Raffin finishing a race in that sort of latter stages of the points. So your real gain is going to come from if he does make that mistake and doesn't take a result one weekend. Obviously, Fernandez would want to capitalise on that. But just as obviously today he's lost out 5 points again, that gap's just widened a little bit more. Obviously the same can happen in race 2. If he can take this win, it does swing it back. When you are fighting over first and second, that difference is a little bit bigger to a few of the points where you get the positions a bit further down. So obviously it's 5 points in that balance every time, and it's not only 5 points more that you'll have, but 5 points less the other guy will take home. So it should be an interesting one. Like I said, Fernandez pretty angry at the result this morning, you know, not sort of bitter, but obviously a little bit frustrated. I think that start probably hampered him quite a lot in the first race, so he'll want to kick on now.
I think his biggest frustration will have been that he hit the front on more than one occasion. So then to give that up and not manage to take the race victory, that's understandably frustrating. Looking at the second row of the grid, Fernandez then will start from P4. Tulovic you've already seen lining up in P5, and Marcon completing the second row of the grid. Now moving on to look at the third row of the grid with Marc Alcoba, who lines up in 7th.
Yeah, definitely that Dynavolt Intact GP team, another one that has representation at this level as well as in the World Championship. So again, we'll be looking for maybe top 10 this time around. Just missed out on that in the first race, so there's always a chance to make that little extra step in the second race of the day. Use what you've learnt in that first one and see what you can do. Yep,
points on the board for the first time this season for Marc Alcoba. And 5 points, in fact, in race number 1, as you said, Fran. And now looking for bigger and better as we work our way through this 2018 season. Alcoba starting in P7 then. Cardalus in 8th position was involved in the battle further down the order first time out. And as I said, we really splintered off into 3 separate races in race number 1. On the evidence of what we saw in qualifying and in that first race, it would be a surprise if the same thing didn't happen here in race 2.
Yeah, definitely. There was some kind of sort of distinct zones of pace we had in that first race, and it would seem unlikely at the moment that anyone's really managed to make a huge difference for this second race. Obviously, conditions a little bit different, but not too crazy. It's not like it was raining this morning, now it's stopped, or anything too extreme to swing the odds in that way. So definitely, I think, hopefully we'll get some more close battles like we had this morning. It was a pretty good race with a few really going down to the wire. And yeah, we'll have to see what they can do. If a few guys maybe can get a better start and get away with those in the pack, or if someone like Tulovic obviously had great late race pace in the first race, that can always swing the pendulum as well. So we'll have to see. But definitely, I think the guys who were just off the podium this morning will be looking now to try and knock on the door to it. Or certainly Fernandez will want to turn the tables on what happened over the last 3 laps.
And the riders will have learned from what they did wrong in race number 1 as well. Be that the riders who had a slow start and could only come good later on, they will now be expecting to pick up the pace earlier in the race to try and stake their claim.
Yeah, definitely. And Dimaseki, like you were saying earlier, super consistent. Again, it was a good result for him this morning. Another top, sort of not quite top 5, but top 10 by a long shot. really in that fight towards the front, looking like he could have challenged for the podium for a little bit. Not quite materialising throughout the length of the race, but really, really solid season for him so far. And again, he'll just be looking for the same, just another solid finish, because that consistency is really showing the progress he's made this season, I think.
2 4th places and 2 6th places for Dimaseki so far in 2018. An opportunity to take a look at the grid in full. These are the riders we've already gone through then, the top 9, the front 3 rows. Rafin, the favourite of P1, and Fernandez, his main championship rival, starting directly behind him. Watch out for the rider currently 3rd in the series. Eki starts from P9. Mikel Pons leads out the 4th row of the grid, the American rider off 12th position, and Alessandro Zacconi somewhat out of position. He's down in 14th place, so work to do for him as we see the full list of 24 riders, including the Superstock riders who are further down the order on the grid. So it's the 2nd race of the day for the Moto2 European Championship. It's also our final race action of our coverage here at the 4th round of the season in the FIM CEV Repsol. And we're building up to race action in Moto2.
So Rafin leading them off on the warm-up lap, obviously already getting a little bit hot into turn 1 there. So it'll be interesting to see whether that will be repeated during the race. But again, Rafin just maybe showing a little bit of intent there, going off first off the line and making sure he's leading the warm-up lap round.
Making our way round towards the grid then to get underway with this final race of the day. And on paper, you'd have to say it's another fight between Rafin and Fernandez, the latter of whom won't want to get off to such a poor start as he did in race number 1, because it left Rafin with too much of an opportunity to run in clear air. What Fernandez really wants to do is leap forward from the 2nd row, box out Rafin, get a few other riders in the mix as well, because gaining back 5 points isn't going to make a huge difference. If you can get other riders in between them as well, that might narrow the gap to a greater extent.
Definitely, you know, like we saw the most famous version of that, Lorenzo Valencia, obviously when he was fighting Marquez for that title in 2013, just trying to slow up the pace and make sure those guys that couldn't go with them at the front have that chance to maybe mix it up a bit, get in the battle, and take some points off your rival as well as you obviously being ahead of them. But I'm not sure, Rafin so far, he's had on paper, easy time of the season so far, but obviously that's because he's obviously done the best job. So it will be interesting to see Rafin in more of a battle and see what he's got. But tactically this morning, obviously he didn't have to take part in a battle because he judged that to perfection and just pulled the pin when he needed to right at the end there. So yeah, it's going to be an interesting race, I think, and it's going to be an interesting start. See if Fernandez can keep that nerve after he knows he made that mistake with the start this morning, and see now if he can make a bigger difference off the line and really get in that battle. If he can stay on Rafin's tail in the first lap and really make that ground up, then I think it should be interesting, because they'll obviously have to use a lot less tyre to get on the Swiss rider.
To Fernandez's credit, he has had podium finishes in each of the 4 rounds so far, just like Rafin, but it's been the Swiss rider who's been able to not just make the podium, but take 3 victories out of 4, 3 victories in a row. Will the hat-trick become a quartet of successes to leave him the clear favourite for the remainder of this 2018 championship? We're about to find out in the final race of the day here at the FIM CEV Repsol in Barcelona, which gets underway. Good start from Edgar Pons, actually the number 57, but it's Fernandez again who's the main story, slow away from the start.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, exactly what he didn't need off the line there. Fernandez swallowed back up into the pack, and Rafin's again taken the whole shot. So yeah, Pons on his tail. I mean, Pons will be another who, like Fernandez, knows that he needs to try and get in front of Rafin and just disrupt his rhythm from the start. We'll see if he can do that. But then obviously Lucas Tulovic has other ideas, and those 2 teammates again already battling each other and just slotted into 3rd and 4th.
Good start for Tulovic. This time sits up in P3, as you've said. He, as we see, battle further down the order. This is the tussle for 5th, 6th and 7th positions further down the order.
Yeah, Fernandez, obviously, it's even maybe worse than it was this morning. He's really dropped a lot through the pack there, and now we're scrabbling to make up some positions. And at least Raffin is only just ahead of Pons there at the front. It's only a 10th at the moment, so he's got some time to try and make his way through. But again, a bit of a shocker for Fernandez off the line, exactly what he didn't want.
Well, he dropped to 9 off the 9th off the line this morning, and he dropped outside of the top 10 altogether this time around. He has made it back up to 9th position. He will try to gain some more ground on this back straight as Tulovic gets a little bit out of shape heading into the braking zone, but manages to hold it. And further down the order, we've got, has he run off the circuit as well there, coming off turn number 10?
Yeah, it's all getting a bit dramatic out there, isn't it now? It's a little bit sketchy there, trying to make some progress through for Fernandez, and they're all just shuffling around a little bit, trying to find position. But looks like now he's going to be in a position to attack at the end of the main straight.
But as you said, it's even worse this time around because he's ended up in a secondary group, and out at the back of that secondary group as Garzo tries to challenge Tulovic for 3rd position. Raffin is breaking away, 0.4 of a second up. Pons holds second, but not for much longer. Between the middle of them comes Tulovic, challenging for 2nd place. He can't quite get there. Pons holds on. It's Raffin, it's Pons, as they scatter further down the order off the circuit altogether. I said we'd seen some running wide at turn number 10. Now we've seen some running wide at turn number 2. That's Fernandez shuffling the pack as he comes through.
Yeah, definitely. Fernandez able to make up some ground there just from those two going way too deep into there. And obviously, like you said, Tulovic trying his best to make it through into 2nd there, not quite able to do it, and very wide around there as his teammate just made it through on the inside, possibly. Depend now on the change of direction again. I think Tulovic, yeah, just holds on to it and gathers it back up. But Fernandez, again, at least now he's got a bit of clear air to this group, and this group is still fairly close together. But like we said, almost the exact what he didn't want scenario for Fernandez now by this stage. But he's obviously got incredible pace, so I'm sure he'll catch these guys relatively quickly, but it's, again, what it takes to get there.
Good racing for 3rd, 4th and 5th positions. Tulovic and Garzo at the moment at the forefront of that battle. Watch further down the order. Fernandez giving it absolutely everything, running deep there, coming off turn number 9 and down the back straight, attempting to haul in lost ground. He's 1.5 seconds back from the race leader, Jesko Raffin, who since breaking 0.4 of a second clear of Edgar Pons has just been managing that gap. And will he be able to manage this race to the checkered flag just as he did in race number 1? It's looking like 4 straight wins for Jesko Raffin as things stand, but a long way to go. 15 laps still remaining.
Yeah, definitely. Obviously, Raffin again just able. It's only a small advantage he seems to have on race pace, but it's just every lap, and it gradually starts to really build up. And no one can quite stay with him, you know. I think they need a little bit more of a tactical sort of Laguna 2008 situation. If you know you've not got the pace to go with him, you just have to try your best as soon as you possibly can and just try and disrupt his rhythm. Like Andrea Iannone did at the America's GP this season. Obviously, there's no way he's got the race pace of Marc Marquez, but as soon as he had the opportunity to try and make a move, he tried it. Even if just to try and disrupt the guy ahead of you and give them something to think about, and they don't just feel like it's their race to lose.
Augusto Fernandez with a new fastest lap of the race, and he is closing down that gap, and it won't be long before he's putting the cat among the pigeons here. 2nd, 3rd, 4th and 5th, a closely packed together group. Dimas Eki, Mr. Consistency at the tail of that group, is going to be the first one to be challenged by Fernandez, but it's Raffin who is out in front and looking comfortable in the clear air, as we've said, looking calm out in front. Pons has maintained that gap at just under 0.4 of a second. There is the graphic showing the number 57, who sits up in P2 at the moment, maybe holding back Tulovic to some extent. We'll see if Tulovic can find a way past on the back straight. They come through now, turn number 9. Pons is under pressure. Tulovic is closing in. He's dropped his teammate Garzo slightly. Tulovic completely sideways in the braking zone, and he's made it stick. I think, frankly, Pons wanted to get out of the way. Thought he might have an opportunity to get the cutback, but Tulovic somehow made it stop.
Yeah, that was fairly spectacular there, wasn't it, really? Not even really backing it in, just so much as taking the corner at a completely different angle. But he's made it work, and see what he's got now. Those two, the teammates, look like they were getting held up a little bit there. Obviously, those two Mistral 610s completely evenly matched, and Garzo had the advantage this morning. Now Tulovic looks like he's got some serious pace, and Pons just not quite able to keep him with these guys at the moment.
And it's Garzo who's now going to have a go for 3rd position down the inside in the braking zone into turn 1. He thinks better of it in the end. He's going to settle in and try and cut back as Tulovic sets a new fastest lap on the way through past Pons, and maybe we could have a surprise up front in Tulovic challenging Rafine. We saw Pons have a go first time out in race 1. We've got, is that Di Masecchi? It is. The number 20 has gone down on the exit of turn number 1 between turns 1 and 2, and that's real disappointment for him. Curse of the commentator. We've been saying he's missed the consistency. He's going to struggle to score in this one.
Yeah, definitely. That's a shame for Di Masecchi, like we've been saying pretty much the whole day. He's had such a consistent, great, solid start to the season, but a shame for him. At least it looked like a probably fairly low drama incident. Couldn't see much damage to the bike at all, so hopefully he'll at least be able to get restarted and get a bit more track time. But it looks like Tulovic is really game on for this. Really gained on Rafine and just took a look back there to check who's coming for him. But really spectacular style, Tulovic. So far off the bike, so low. Compared to Rafine, you can really see the distance. And he just, you know, just a little bit scrappy, really spectacular. Looks like a little bit more on the edge, but obviously the lap times are coming in and he's the fastest man on track.
Tulovic and Fernandez, the fastest riders out there at the moment. Fernandez has made his way through to 4th position, passing Garzo. Edgar Pons is next on his list as he challenges for the podium places. Here they are, the three of them, Pons, Garzo and Fernandez, but it's Fernandez now ahead of Garzo. Garzo is at the back of that group. He's down in 5th position. Fernandez, as they come onto the start-finish straight, will be looking for a way through. And up into... Garzo as well, challenging Garzo from an distance back, but he has to back out of it in the end. And what looked as though it was going to be a slipstream battle into turn number 1 with 3 riders involved, they end up settling in one behind the other, and no positions changed for now at least.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's going to be a little bit frustrating for Fernandez. He just wants to clear this, what will be to him traffic, and then head off after the front duo. But Tulovic, to his credit, absolutely on the rear wheel of Rafine still, not letting him get away at all. Closed in and looks fairly comfortable there as well. So got great pace and not too scrappy at all. But again, you can see that different style, just leg coming out there and just backing it around that corner. So it looks like it's a good race so far. He does keep looking behind him. I'm not sure if he's waiting for the cavalry to arrive or what, but now you've got a fair gap at the moment, son. Push on and see if we can have a race on our hands and get someone in front of Rafine.
Pons a little bit deep round turns 7 and 8, and the momentum coming up the hill is very much with Augusto Fernandez, who's going to tuck into the slipstream here, an opportunity to challenge for 3rd position. Tulovic closing out in front, but it's Fernandez who's on the move. Down the inside he goes. Pons wants to turn, but he can't. Fernandez is alongside him. Pons is pushed off the racing line. Garzo is going to try and take advantage as well, but he can't quite do so. Holds station in 5th place. Good overtaking from Fernandez, but meanwhile the top 2 have managed to gain almost a second's advantage over this group behind.
Yeah, definitely. From Fernandez there, that was really aggressive, but really well done. No contact, but yeah, nice and clean pass, but making sure he's really the big winner out of that. He's not only gained a position, but the 2 guys behind him obviously blocked out of that corner, couldn't turn in, and he's now also got a nice little cushion of daylight there to hopefully use to push on and catch these front 2. Looks like Tulovic, is he just, yeah, he's going to, no, not quite. He thought about it there. I think he's very, very tempted. But it's great so far to see that someone's really got that pace to go with Rafine. Obviously, in the first race, Rafine did make a mistake and he didn't keep the lead for the whole race. But Tulovic looks like he's really racing, getting ready to try and attack the Swiss rider when he can.
You're right that he keeps looking over his shoulder, just wants to check on the progress of the group behind him before he makes a bold lunge, knowing that he could get it all wrong and end up losing ground. But at the moment, he's got a second's advantage. Now is the moment to try and strike while he has got that buffer, because Fernandez is going to be gunning to try and close it down. And the race now is over 4th position because Pons doesn't look to have the pace to live with the main podium challengers. Garzo's been swarming all over the back of him since the start-finish straight. I thought he was going to get him down into turn number 1. He couldn't do so. He may have an opportunity to get him into turn number 10 as they work their way through this middle sequence of turns and onto the back straight. Tucking in nicely behind, it's Hector Garzo challenging for 4th position. Pons holds it at the moment. Separate race up front. Tulovic is closing. Tulovic isn't close enough, but Garzo is and makes a lunge from way back, but Pons gets it turned in time, once again holding on.
Yeah, that looked like it had the potential to be a bit dramatic there. He just managed to pull up and not cause too much drama. But yeah, Tulovic definitely looks like he's ready to make a move as soon as he can, but obviously not reckless, so not trying to move where it's probably not going to work. I'd say that bodes pretty well for him if he thinks he's got the pace to really stay with him and choose his moment rather than just having to go for it as soon as he can. So it's going to be interesting down into turn 1 now. Tulovic looks a little bit less comfortable in the braking zones, but certainly willing to make those moves and get a bit out of shape and then haul the bike back round.
Meanwhile, Garzo is going for it this time completely alongside, slightly sideways for Pons, and Garzo says thank you very much into turn number 1. He's rehearsed that type of move on a couple of occasions, but finally makes it stick. He finally does get in front, but now he's got a bit of a gap to make up. 1.2 seconds between 3rd and 4th positions, and it might be that that's the glass ceiling for Hector Garzo, and it'll be a struggle for him to get in and among the top 3 barring errors.
Yeah, definitely. It's taken quite a while for Garzo to get past, and then again, just really wide round there and just allowed Pons to get a look up the inside, but I think he's going to try and immediately take him back. He does. If he can keep it nice and tight through here, he should keep that track position. So yeah, obviously that kind of little error in that wide line, like the Mistrals do take a bit of a wider line at a few corners. Both of them are doing that, both Garzo and Tulovic, but that obviously too much of an open door there when Pons thought, thank you, I'll try that. But some nice racing here, but I do think maybe Garzo took a little bit too long to get past Pons there, and he seems to be paying the price now. And Fernandez is really catching this front too.
Garzo 2.5 seconds back now from the race leader as Tulovic runs wide, and it's a gift for Fernandez, who comes through into 2nd position. A massive error from Lucas Tulovic, who was looking so under control in this race, who looked set to be Rafin's biggest challenger. And Rafin, well, next time he takes a look over his shoulder, he won't believe his good luck in one sense, but in the other hand, it's more damage limitation for Fernandez. If Rafin does go on to win, he's only got 5 points to make up with Fernandez tucked in behind him.
Yeah, definitely. Obviously, that's exactly what Tulovic didn't want to have been doing now, even maybe shaking his head a little bit there. Nothing like the dramatic shaking of the head we had for Danny Pedrosa at Mugello, with that aero seeming to have a strange effect on the bike. But Tulovic obviously will be pretty frustrated with that. He was right with him, and now he's got a fair amount of work to do to try and catch that up again. But he did seem to have pretty comparable pace. So I don't know if he just made a little bit of an error there as well. Just needs to keep it all in calm and just you know, head down and focus on the task at hand. But obviously it'd be so frustrating when you've been right there and then you make an error like that, and he's not only lost some ground on Rafin but also lost that position. Well,
Tulovic lost 1.5 seconds in that final sector with that error, and he's lost almost another half a second in the first sector of this lap, so I wonder if he might be struggling perhaps as this race goes on, as Hector Garzo and Edgar Pons come back into the race for 3rd, and Tulovic has to take a look over his shoulder. It seems as though he's given up on the battle for the top 2, but a man who certainly hasn't given up on the battle up front is Augusto Fernandez, who a graphic showed earlier on set a new fastest lap of the race last time around, a 1:45.3. He gained a couple of tenths of a second on Rafin. The gap between the top 2 is now less than a second as things close up further down the order for 4th as well, and Pons tries to make a look, but he isn't close enough for the moment at least, and Garzo holds on.
Yeah, I think definitely as well for Fernandez, it was a pretty dream scenario, that the fact that Tulovic made that mistake, because he didn't have to waste any time trying to get past him. So obviously door straight open on the normal racing line, nothing at all compromised, and he still gained the position. Now he's got a little bit of air between him and Rafin to really try and unleash his pace a bit and close down the Swiss rider.
Well, while Fernandez tries to close in on the race leader, Jesko Rafin, we have the appetizer, the race for 4th position behind Tulovic, 1.1 seconds behind Tulovic in fact. It's Garzo versus Pons, and Pons seems to have the pace, and he's made the move before the braking zone. The number 57 back up into 4th position, and Garzo's going to run deep. In fact, both of them are going to run a deep, and over the sleeping policeman they go. And Garzo has lost out to a greater extent than Pons, because Pons didn't go as far deep around turn number 1, but both of them leaving the circuit altogether. They were pushing so hard into that braking zone they couldn't make the apex.
Yeah, there was no way that was going to happen really, was there? It's a bit unfortunate for both of them. At least obviously both got it sat up in the runoff and managed to get back on track. Garzo now, it's a bit of a gap that he's lost there to Pons, but yeah, it was just looked like they weren't going to get that stopped, and they really didn't.
Well, it looks as though we now have a clear podium contender trio. Rafin, Fernandez and Tulovic. Tulovic was on the march in the first sector, so he hasn't given up completely on the top two positions. And the fact that he hasn't got much company behind might give him a bit of inspiration to go on and chase the top two up ahead of him. 1.7 seconds separate the top three.
Yeah, definitely. Obviously, he's had a good look behind him a few times, obviously keeping an eye on that, and that'll be on his pit board as well. So now that's given him a little bit of breathing space, like you say, and there's not so much pressure from behind, so he can concentrate on trying to just iron out those few mistakes he's made and see if he's got the pace to catch these two.
You said earlier on about his style, the way he hangs off the machine. At times it looks as though he's about to be the incident, quite honestly, but he has got plenty of speed here, up in third position and starting to close down Fernandez. Could get in the way of this championship fight up front.
Yeah, definitely. You can see Tulovic's elbow is down most of the time it can be. So it's super spectacular to watch. And some incredible corner speed, but yeah, really different. You can really tell who each of these riders are. Like you can see here, Tulovic really backing it in, super low off the bike. Fernandez dangling his leg. Rafin much more Biaggi or Lorenzo-esque, just the knee comes out. It's really great to watch, especially when they're quite close together and coming into that braking zone one after the other, to watch all of them there.
Tulovic with a new fastest lap of the race last time around, a new fastest first sector. Tulovic is on the march here, but has he got too much ground to cover? Lap number 10 of 17, and it's Lukas Tulovic, the fastest rider on the track at the moment, but he sits in P3. Fernandez between himself and the race leader, Jesko Rafin. We have a three-way fight for the podium places, a separate battle for 4th and 5th between Pons and Garzeau, and just for the record, best of the rest is Mikel Pons, who sits in 6th position, and in a 4-rider group, 6th down to 9th. So a familiar pattern to the race. The top 5 have a pace advantage over the rest of the pack, but then there's a secondary group further down the order, and they're getting pretty feisty as well in the challenge for 6th position. Making our way down into turn number 10 with Tulovic closing in, a new personal best 3rd sector, personal best 1st sector as well. Tulovic may well even lower the fastest lap of the race once again. He gained in 0.4 of a second last time around on the 2 riders up ahead of him. The gap between the top 3, or the distance covering the top 3 now, is less than a second. Tulovic is coming.
Yeah, definitely. It's a good recovery. Obviously collected himself after these few mistakes and a bit of a scrappy lap. Like you said, he's lost 2 seconds overall to those couple of mistakes, so to have closed back in again, a little bit of a coulda, woulda, shoulda, in that 2 seconds further ahead on the road right now is in the lead of the race, which he isn't, but it's all good. At least he's managed to catch those guys back up again.
Notification coming through from race control that the number 57, Edgar Pons, is going to be penalised for a shortcut at turns 1 and 2. A very precise 1.434 seconds, so he's now got to really get on with it as Tulovic sets yet another fastest lap of the race. 0.7 of a second now between 1st and 3rd. What I was going to say about Pons is he's managed to build up a 1.767 second lead over Garzeau, a lead that he now needs to maintain to hold on to that 4th position.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a just over 1.4 seconds that he'll be penalised by the end of the race rather. So yeah, he needs to make sure he has that gap above Garzeau in order to retain that position where he crosses the line. So that'll be interesting. Obviously as well, it'd be interesting if they can communicate that to the rider when he's aware of that situation on the bike, so he can make sure he does keep pushing and hopefully keep that 4th place. But obviously both him and Garzeau made a big error there, but it did seem like maybe Pons gained a little bit more from it, because they obviously went off in tandem together, and then Pons was quite ahead on the road when they came back on.
I suppose the argument would be that Pons had the inside line, so he was the one to be able to dictate, and there wasn't much room for Garzeau to have stayed on the track even if he wanted to, quite honestly, and I'm sure that that's the line that they've taken in making that decision. Meanwhile, back at the front, Tulovic is still trying his utmost to claw in, but Rafina's broken slightly on this lap, and now it seems to be a fight for 2nd position between Fernandez and Tulovic.
Yeah, definitely. You can see now Rafin putting the hammer down a little bit, just got a bit of clear air. It's almost the same gap now from 1st to 2nd as it was between the first 3 on the previous lap. So this is going to be interesting. I think Tulovic will be well aware of that, watching what's happening ahead of him, and should, I imagine, probably try a move soon on Fernandez if he thinks he's got better pace and he can leave the Spaniard behind.
Incidentally, Pons now has an advantage of more than 2.5 seconds to Hector Garzo behind. So if he maintains that kind of advantage, he will be looking good to hold on to 4th position. I think it was unlikely that he was going to make progress into the top 3 nonetheless. It's a 3-way fight for top spot. Rafin, Fernandez and Tulovic. The gap oscillating slightly between Rafin and Tulovic, but for the moment at least, the number 2 appears to have this one settled, and it will play into his hands completely here if Tulovic manages to find a way past Fernandez.
Yeah, definitely. Obviously, the dream now for Rafin is that he takes the win and then Tulovic can get past Fernandez and, again, just extend that lead in the championship. Seems like Tulovic just doesn't have the pace quite through there, but he's certainly not let Fernandez get away. And again, that spectacular style so far off the bike, you can't really tell which of those 2 Mistrals it is when they're at full lean, because you can just see a boot. So really spectacular. There you can see some lap traffic as well. That's not got in the way too much. That's always good.
First of the stock runners then, just being lapped towards the back of the field with just over 5 laps remaining. Incidentally, last time around, lap number 11, 3 of the top 4 setting a new personal best lap, so there's no great concern about tyre wear by the looks of it at this stage. It's a full-out blast towards the checkered flag.
Yeah, it definitely seems that way, doesn't it? They're just getting quicker at the moment. So it's interesting in that top 3, so close together, and obviously it changes. You see that time round, Tulovic a little bit off the pace of the other 2, but they've had such close lap times, and you can see the gap just change throughout the lap where one is stronger than the other and then vice versa. So we'll have to see now Rafin getting dangerously close to a second ahead and that magic number.
And Tulovic's slowest lap for some time, actually, last time around, a 1:45.7 compared to a 1:45.1 for Rafin, a new personal best. He knows exactly when to go, doesn't he, the Swiss rider? He did it in the last race as well, just made that bolt in the closing stages and managed to break clear, as we see confirmation of the other rider who was penalised for an incident at turns 1 and 2, Marc Alcoba. He sits in 7th position in the race. He's involved in this group with Mikel Pons, the number 77, and Tommaso Marcon, but it looks as though that penalty for Marc Alcoba could drop him to the back of that group anyway. As we join the fray towards the front of the field, it's Rafin, Fernandez and Tulovic. This one has started to settle down now. Rafin approaching the 1 second margin for his advantage out in front, as you said, and Tulovic now 0.8 of a second back from Fernandez.
Yeah, definitely. You see Fernandez again a little bit cheeky with the track limits there on the outside, just onto the green stuff. But I think it's quite interesting how this morning, obviously, Tulovic fairly sort of under the radar during the first half of the race, and then really showed incredible pace through the latter stages and through the mid part of the race. This race seems to have gone the opposite way a little bit for the German, and he's had really solid pace off the line, but then maybe now just struggling to keep up with the pace of those 2 guys ahead of him. So Rafin last time round was a 45.1 and Tulovic was a 45.7, so quite a significant difference there. Who knows, maybe Tulovic knows he can like tighten it up a little bit, just you know, iron out those little errors. Who knows, you know, if he thinks he's contributed to that or if it's just tyres and he just doesn't quite have the pace to be able to close in on these guys.
I think Tulovic will be questioning what might have been had he not made the error, run wide, given up second position, because when he had that mid-race spurt, he was way back from the top 2 and gained ground. Imagine he'd had that mid-race spurt on the tail of Jesko Rafin. He really could have complicated things for the championship leader. As things stand, though, he looks set to take a 4th consecutive victory, and that would further extend his championship margin. A full 2 seconds now separating first from third, and for the record, Edgar Pons 3.5 seconds now ahead of the direct rival, even factoring in that penalty.
Yeah, exactly. That's good news for Pons. At least he's managed to move himself hopefully into a safe place where he'll cross the line 4th, and that penalty will just affect his race time. But Rafin, yeah, like you said, looks to have maybe got this in the bag again, and Tulovic, what could have been, definitely, it would have been super interesting, I think, to see not only what would have happened with Rafin and whether Tulovic could have taken the lead and then used that clear air and pulled away possibly, but also how Rafin would have reacted and how that would have changed the kind of view of the race overall, because obviously other than very briefly this morning, Rafin's really had it all his own way. So yeah, but you know, you've got to hand it to him. He's really the class of the field right now, and that's why he's consistently taking poles, podiums and wins.
Jesko Rafin certainly hasn't had to run in traffic. At most, he's had one rider in front of him during this weekend, but he's looked good out in front. Almost qualifying pace, just ramming in the laps. Consistency as well, crucial. Other riders have had moments. Tulovic, for example, went on a string of setting new fastest laps of the race. but it came to nothing. He's still down in third position, and now 2.5 seconds back from Rafin, your race leader.
Yeah, definitely. Obviously, the good thing for Tulovic now, if he is struggling a bit with tyres or if he is going to drop off the pace a bit more, the guy behind him is Edgar Pons, who would then have to catch him and pass him by more than 1.4 seconds in order to take that podium off him. So Tulovic now probably just needs to reset a little bit, too far off the win, to just take another podium. Like you said, consistency is a big thing for the German to aim for. He's had one podium already this season. Take another podium. That's a really, really good result. Obviously, leading the race, challenging for the win, that would be fantastic. But, you know, he's a young rider. He's still making good progress. So another podium is a solid day's work.
The other rider attempting to make progress in this field, Mark Alcoba, who's the other rider, of course, with a penalty to his name to be applied at the end of the race. Very close indeed to 6th position, but if he does get that 6th place, he's got to break over a second clear to consolidate it in the final reckoning. So there's a little bit of adding up to be done when we do get to the checkered flag, but we'll keep an eye on that if indeed the positions do change. Alcoba and Pons setting new personal best laps last time around in the fight for 6th and 7th places, possibly the closest battle on track at the moment, because Rafin has got this race well and truly under control.
Yeah, I think so. It's around 8 tenths now, and the Swiss rider doesn't look to be giving too much up to Fernandez. Last time around, Fernandez was a little bit quicker, but sort of less than half a tenth. So not much at all. It just depends now. The last few laps of the race are going to be pretty interesting. Fernandez, I think, will throw the kitchen sink at this one after that disappointment this morning.
And Tulovic is losing time quite dramatically. Sector 2, he's lost over half a second, another couple of tenths of a second in Sector 3. So Tulovic certainly not living with the pace of the front runners. We've got a two-way fight up front, and the gap comes down to 6 tenths of a second last time over the line. Fernandez just needs to get a little bit closer to try and gain the slipstream advantage. It's Rafin who has timed everything perfectly all weekend. He was significantly faster than anyone else in qualifying, but in race trim, he has got company from his main championship rival, Augusto Fernandez. Half a second now, the gap between the top two.
Yeah, definitely. Maybe we spoke too soon. Again, we've cursed this. But definitely Fernandez seems to be gaining a little bit of ground on his rival here. And like I said, he will throw everything at this after that disappointment this morning, I think. And yeah, Tulovic really dramatically dropped off the pace now. He must have hit a bit of a cliff with those tyres. Compared to Fernandez ahead of him did a 45.1, Tulovic a 46.8. So a big chunk of time lost there for the German. But it's staying around half a second on this lap, and there's not far to go now, just one more after this one. So it's going to be interesting to see if Fernandez can really pull in that gap towards the end of this lap and then down the main straight, because obviously in this stage in the first race it was the other way around, and it was Rafin who could just pull that pin and just take a little bit more out of his rival.
That 1:45 one lap you were talking about for Fernandez was a new personal best, so he's certainly pushing as hard as he dares in the latter stage to this race. Lap traffic just moving out of the way, but lap traffic could play a part in this closing lap. They're not quite close enough at the moment for that to affect it, but imagine catching a lap runner at just the wrong moment through a chicane. That could really affect the race. Yeah,
definitely. Obviously the racing line is the racing line for a reason. That's because it's the fastest way around the track. So if someone's in the way, even if you know, they're not necessarily intending to be, or that they've not seen the blue flag, but if you're, you know, they're riding their own race, it can be a bit of a difficult situation for them as well to make sure they get out of the way. But pretty close now. It's just 0.330 over the line, so 3 tenths, not even 3.5 tenths. Fernandez, I think, definitely fancies this one. I think we've got game on here.
Great last sector from Fernandez. Will it come too late, that final sector for him on this lap around? Less than 2 tenths of a second between the two of them as they come up on Alexander and in one of the lap runners, or he's about to become a lap runner, but he holds back Rafin. Fernandez goes around the outside of him under blue flags, and Fernandez has hit the front, and Rafin held at bay on the racing line behind the lap runner. That was prescient analysis from the pair of us, because Fernandez takes that as his opportunity to come through for the race lead.
Absolutely, that was an incredible move. Obviously that's luck, but if you take that obviously and then
and that's the battle further down the order I was talking about between the 70 and the 77, Mark Alcoba and Mikel Pons, and they've both come down. So much for the penalty to be applied after the race for Alcoba. It's not going to make any difference. He's down and out of the race. Closing stage of this one up front. Fernandez and Rafin, a calm race throughout, and then it all kicks off on the final lap.
Definitely, it's too much drama to keep up with almost, but Rafin though still very much with his key rival here, but again as well, he's a bigger advantage, so he's probably the least likely of the two to try anything too crazy over the final few corners, but so close here, it could even come down to the drag to the line.
Fernandez has been immaculate in the final sector, but it's Rafin who makes a lunge. Fernandez with the cutback, drag race down to the line. Surely Fernandez has got it this time. He knows it and takes the checkered flag. Brilliant racing on the final lap between Augusto Fernandez and Jesko Rafin. You could not ask for a better way to close out the weekend here in Barcelona than with a couple of overtakes for the race lead on the very final lap of the very final race, and it reignites this championship fight in the Moto2 European Championship. Jesko Rafin, 3 wins in a row. Have that for your hat-trick as Augusto Fernandez comes through on the final lap and takes the race victory. He's delighted with that. That's a 10-point swing in championship terms. He looked set to drop 20 points back with defeat at the hands of Rafin, but a well-timed move against the lapped runner effectively, and Nin was holding the inside line, coming around the right-hander. Fernandez knew that was his moment to strike, and Rafin couldn't have done anything differently or better about that, because if he'd gone wide to avoid the back marker, Fernandez would have tried to cut up the inside and use his momentum on the racing line. It was just a little bit of misfortune at just the wrong time, and we'd said that if these lead runners catch the back markers at the wrong moment, it could turn the race on its head, and it did exactly that. Augusto Fernandez through to take the checkered flag, and in the end we almost forgot about Lukas Tulovic, who was up there fighting for the top 2 positions in the early part of the race as well. Just a mistake from him, gave up second position. He makes his way round. He seems satisfied enough with that, and that will do his championship challenge a great deal of favours as well, as he picks up a decent haul of 16 points here today. But nobody was expecting that the lap runners were going to have as much of an involvement in that race as they ended up having on that final lap. It'd be great to see that back in a few moments' time in the highlights reel. Fernandez it was who fought his way through. Rafin will not believe it, because it looked set to be a 4th successive race win, a 20-point championship lead, and the march would have looked set to continue. Now it's a 5-point advantage in that race, at least for Augusto Fernandez. Any advantage gained by Rafin with a race victory in race 1 this weekend is wiped away, and we're back to a 10-point championship advantage for Jesko Rafin. No doubt about it, the Swiss rider most consistent throughout this weekend. Pole position, half a second advantage in qualifying. He was hitting the front, he was pulling clear, he was managing his gaps. Perfect riding, but just that little bit of misfortune for him, and that's exactly what his rival needed. Augusto Fernandez coming through to take the checkered flag, then ahead of Jesko Rafin in second. Lukas Tulovic gets third. It's Edgar Pons who takes 4th position, and of course with that incident behind him, that means that there's a 15-second gap to his nearest rival, so the post-race penalty won't affect him too much, particularly as he set a new fastest lap of the race on the very final lap, a 1:44.9, just to show that he had the pace there. Pons, who made it up onto the podium in race number 1, only managing 4th in race number 2. But that's a better fate than that which awaited Marc Alcoba and Mikel Pons on the final lap, as the two of them must have come together. We saw them both sprawled out in the gravel trap. They were fighting in the top 10 of the field, looking set for good points hauls, but their battle with one another, which quite frankly was probably unnecessary, because Marc Alcoba had a penalty to be applied after the race anyway, and would have stood to lose a second. He was the one who was behind Pons trying to find a way through. It was unlikely that he was going to pass him and bridge a significant gap in the closing stages of the race as well. So those two will be very frustrated about how that race ended, the number 70 and the 77. Particularly frustrating for Mikel Pons, who was the better off in terms of the championship standings, coming into that race in 8th position and having a record of having finished at every race so far this season. That record ends in race 2 in Barcelona, but it's congratulations all round, and to the top 3 in particular. Tulovic in 3rd position, Rafin in 2nd, and Fernandez with that last lap overtake coming through for the race victory. Impressive stuff, half a second faster than his direct rival on the final lap, and coming through for a race win by 0.2 of a second. Rafin was bold coming into the final turn, took a bit of a lunge from well back. Fernandez had the experience and the sense, rather than to try and stick it out around the outside, just to cut back up the inside, get his wheels in line earlier, and pull back in front ahead of the checkered flag. So confirmation then of that race result, and it is Augusto Fernandez who takes the win and the 25 points ahead of Jesko Rafin in second, 2 tenths behind, as I said. Lukas Tulovic gets third. Edgar Pons, after that time penalty is applied, ends up almost 2 seconds back, but he'd gained very much on Tulovic in the final couple of laps there to finish just 4 tenths of a second behind him on track, so a shame for him about that penalty, but it doesn't affect his points scoring. And the last of the point scorers here will be Luis Pomares of Spain, who takes the single point and is the top stock runner in that race as well. Opportunity to join our race winner, Augusto Fernandez.
So Augusto, second race here today and managed to change that result from the first one, turn it around, take the win. Great tactics there as well on the final lap. Obviously a bit of traffic making it tough. How was that win for you?
Well, I'm really happy. Want to thank my family, all my family. I want to thank my family, my team, and everyone, because it's been a really tough winter and the start of the season for us. Well, anyway, talking about the race, I did a really bad start as in the first race. And then I just pushed really hard to try to catch Jesko and Tulovic. They were going so fast. Well, at the end, I was struggling a lot with the tire, no grip. But well, I think I was lucky at the end of the race with with the other riders, you know. But anyway, I'm so happy and it's good for the championship. Good points.
Y también en castellano, por favor.
Bueno, agradecer a mi familia, a toda mi familia por todo y a mi equipo bueno, no ha sido fácil para nosotros este comienzo de temporada y el invierno, pero bueno, la carrera bien, la salida fatal, salido como el culo, bueno, he intentado apretar, sacar el ritmo de la primera carrera, que ha sido muy bueno, no hemos conseguido, pero bueno, he intentado coger a Jesko. He pillado a Tulovic, Jesko seguía tirando muy fuerte y he intentado no aflojar para que el mínimo error que cometiese estar ahí. Y bueno, no ha sido un error, ha sido los doblados. He tenido un poco de suerte, no lo sé, pero a la que le he visto el hueco me he metido ahí y luego he intentado cerrar todas las puertas y tenía claro que era la mía. Así que nada, muy contento y buenos puntos para el campeonato.
Gracias.
So Augusto Fernandez accepts a little bit of good fortune there in taking the win, says that the back marker certainly played its part, but it's been a hard start to the season for him, and he says that he and the team are satisfied with that. He'd like to thank the team and his family. Great racing for Augusto Fernandez, who takes his first win of the campaign after being the season's nearly man with 3 second places. He bounces back in race number 2 here in Catalunya, having seen race 1 escape from his grasp. Jesko Rafin's hat-trick of race victories, his sequence undefeated, ends here in Barcelona with a second place finish in race number 2. That brings to a conclusion our race action here in Barcelona. The podium still remains and an opportunity to round out our day, but first we'll leave you with the action from the highlights in Moto2. Fran rejoins us in our commentary position. The eagle-eyed amongst you during that highlights reel will have spotted the late crash on turn number 1 between Marc Alcoba and Michael Pons. A pretty unnecessary incident for them on the final lap, quite frankly, because their positions as a result of time penalties looked settled anyway, but quite a big off. So hopefully those two riders okay after that dramatic last lap incident.
Yeah, definitely some big drama there that we didn't quite see at the time, but on the replay, bit of an expensive last lap incident there. So close to the end and then just not able to get to the flag.
Well, we now move on to take a look at the podium finishers. Excellent effort from Lukas Tulovic, who at one stage seemed to have the pace to chase down the race leader, wasted it somewhat with an error whilst holding second position and dropping back to third. And although he put in a couple of valiant laps to close back in, he was unable to do so in the end. Augusto Fernandez it is who takes our race win ahead of Jasko Ruffin. Jasko Ruffin looked set to take that checkered flag, but on the closing lap just got caught up behind the lapped runner at the wrong moment.
Yeah, definitely. Obviously, Fernandez saying he had a bit of luck there on that final lap, but made the most of it, and that's exactly what he did. So now we have the national anthem, I believe, for Mr. Fernandez on home turf, or close to it.
Repsol para el vencedor, para Augusto Fernández. Ahí está con la fotografia. I en record amb ell, doncs, anem a escoltar com a guanyador l'himne d'Espanya. Okay, enhorabuena, Augusto.
Many congratulations then to Fernandez, who put in a fantastic ride there to take the checkered flag. There was a point at which we really thought that race was dead and buried. There were 2 seconds separating the top 3. There was a second separating the top 2. Ruffin controlled the whole weekend. He seemed to have everything exactly where he wanted it, but perhaps he doesn't have such a great pace advantage, because when it came down to it, he wasn't able to up his game any further. That was the maximum that he was giving throughout.
Yeah, definitely. Obviously, he's got explosive one-lap pace so far this season, most often in qualifying, but at least he's got some good competition there, and Fernandez making it a little bit closer at the top after that race. So it's back down to the lovely gap of 10 points that it was at the start of the day.
10-point swing, of course, because we went into that race with a 15-point deficit. It looked set to open up to 20, and then it changed in the closing stages. Edgar Pons holds on to third position along with Dimas Eki after the dramas of the last lap in that race further down the order as well. That shook up the field somewhat as we take a look at the rest of the scorers from this 2018 season. But there's no doubt about it, in the context of the Moto2 European Championship, this has turned into a two-rider fight as things stand. No one else has had the consistency to match Ruffin and Fernandez.
Yeah, definitely. I think it'll be interesting to see what happens now. We'll move on to Motorland Aragon. Very different track than at the end of July. We've got 2 Moto2 races there, so another 50 points on the board for these guys.
So that brings us to a conclusion of proceedings then here in Catalonia for the 4th round of the FIM CEV Repsol. Thanks for joining us.